Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/get-started. That's greenlight.com/get-started.
You thought it was about climate change? I thought it was about COVID.
No, they made it before COVID.
Huh.
So good, though. Jonah Hill?
So good, dude.
Step right up. Step right up. See the Chicago Giant.
No. Do
Step
not
right up.
step right up. Don't.
Hey, Eli.
No, don't step right up.
What's with the setup?
And why is Heath in a cage again?
Again, thank you, Cecil.
Well,
Yeah.
since you asked, Cecil, this week's episode got me thinking. We're missing out on some major moolah by not cashing in on our own giant. I mean, did you know that Heath is in the 98.9th percentile of height for human beings?
Wow. That's pretty good. Fuck.
Huh.
Yeah. And we charge $1 to look him over. I mean, we could be rich.
I mean, we do like money.
I guess if they can't touch him, how big
Right?
a deal
He's
is
already
it?
here. Seriously?
Oh, no. Sorry, but it looks like you're taking this one for the team. This is for us.
Can I at least have some pants, please?
Definitely not.
Of course not.
That's like the whole reason we're doing this.
So not a giant everywhere.
Mm-mm.
I see.
Nope.
That's not how percentiles work. You don't divide. There's 100 of them. You don't divide them into points. That's dumb.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts because this is the internet and that's how it works now. I'm Cecil and I'll be trying to mold this story into something special, but I'll need my sculptors. So let me introduce the Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Donatello, and H.R. Geiger of our crew, Noah, Heath, Tom, and Eli.
Oh, I knew you'd keep Raphael for yourself, you fucking sigh-hogging bastard. You're obviously Leonardo. He has the sword.
Okay.
But I got Leonardo. He has a code, too. Pretty sweet. Dan Brown, renowned author. Literature. Literature.
The only realistic part of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the eating New York pizza in a sewer with the rats. That part
That
checked
does
out.
check
That
out.
was the-
Yeah. That's
Makes the sewer and the rat so worthwhile.
I'm just saying, Donatello didn't base an entire sequel around an alien blowjob. So, no, I think we know who the real genius is on that list that you made there, Cecil.
Okay. All right.
It's called Species 2. It's on TBS.
Some of the most
Right now.
amazing yet unknown people throughout history have been the patrons of the arts, and you can follow in their footsteps. And if you'd like to learn how to join their ranks, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Noah, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
The Cardiff Giant.
Okay, so I'm guessing it probably isn't a baseball team from Cardiff, Indiana. What is the Cardiff Giant?
Okay, so it's one of the silliest and most transparently false hoaxes ever pulled on the American people in the pre-Trump era. Okay, it was
Good disclaimer.
It was a lazily crafted fake. The Cardiff Giant I'm talking about here was a lazily crafted fake whose creator claimed it was the remains of a biblical Nephilim and
Awesome.
managed to make hundreds of thousands of dollars before people wised up to it. And it competes with Piltdown Man, which will doubtless get its own episode one of these days, for the title of my favorite fake humanoid remains story of all time.
Yeah. Well, my favorite is Osama bin Laden, but then this one for sure, second place.
Sorry, Heath. I'm usually with you with the conspiracy stuff, but you think we faked shooting a guy's wife in the leg so we could murder him? Do you think that was our made-up
Perfect
story?
crime, Eli. Perfect crime. Think about
I
it.
don't know, man. Was she sleeping? Because I checked and it doesn't count
No,
if she's
it-
sleeping.
clearly it
when they do
doesn't.
it.
Interesting.
So So you might think that something like faking human remains wouldn't have a golden era, but it turns out it does. And if you thought about it long enough, you would know when and why. So Darwin's On the Origin of Species was published in 1859, and pretty much the next day, people started turning up at colleges and shit saying they'd found the missing link. And while most of those were rejected out of hand, some of them very much weren't. Academics on the evolution side were eager to back their claims up with tangible evidence, as were the ones still insisting that humans were fashioned by God from mud and leftover ribs.
It's a Homo erectus set.
See, so you're being insensitive to our Christian listeners. It's Erectus and Eve, not Erectus and Steve.
Now, I got to give this one
Homo
famous
erectus.
example to sort of set the stage. This comes from Calaveras County, California, where in 1866, miners claimed to have discovered a human skull deep in a mine below a layer of lava. Now, eventually, the skull made it into the hands of the state geologist of California, and man voted to have the most 1866 name in all of 1866, Josiah Whitney. Now, Josiah
Fucking Steve 1866.
Right, yeah.
Pissed me off, but I think you're still right.
Does he just preface everything with a yeehaw?
You gotta
before the
feel
sentence?
like,
I feel like
he
has
does.
to. Is he ever not waving a hat? I'd wave a hat all day if I was Josiah Whitney.
So while waving a hat, almost certainly, he had recently published works suggesting that humans hadn't changed significantly for over a million years. So when this skull showed up purporting to prove that, he wasn't as skeptical as he probably should have been. He declared it real and went to his grave insisting that it was genuine, but pretty much everybody who ever seriously investigated it came to the exact opposite conclusion. I mean, several people ultimately admitted to being in on the hoax. Turns out to be, as near as we can tell, a 1,000-year-old Native American skull that was placed in the mine specifically to fuck with that haughty geologist from Harvard.
Right. Because if anyone needs to be taken down a peg, am I right?
Yeah.
There's just a guy walking around sprinkling skulls like the guy from the last
Yeah,
story
right.
who's
Yeah.
just sprinkling diamonds everywhere.
Johnny Appleseed.
Just you wait, sir. We're getting to it. Now, there are people to this day that still insist the skull is genuine. And I mean, it is a genuine skull, but it's often cited by creationists as proof that evolutionists just ignore the evidence that doesn't fit their theories. Now, radiocarbon dating in 1992 proved that this was a modern skull, but if you buy into radiocarbon dating, you don't need more proof that creationism is wrong.
Yep.
I also have to point this out. The Calaveras skull is obviously named after the county in which it was found, but Calaveras is also, it's the Spanish word for skulls.
This is amazing.
Well, I'm relatively sure that's a coincidence, but shame on anybody who didn't give bonus scrutiny to something that was called the Skull's Skull.
Skull. Okay, so you guys found it at 1 Skull Street, Unit Skull, California. 9021 Skull. Cool. Yeah, look at these pimples, though. Look at these pimples. This is awesome. Science.
But one day we're going to translate the cave paintings and find out that they're all just like naming things Cowie McCow. That's all they say.
It just says first. I don't get it. So debates between creationism and evolution were the main drivers of the whole surge in fake humans, but not always in the way that you would suspect. And that brings us to the Cardiff Giant, which was ultimately the product of an atheist realizing just how stupid the religious people around him were. The atheist was a New York tobacconist named George Hull, and the idea apparently first occurred to him in 1867 when he was arguing against the Bible at a Methodist revival. Specifically, he challenged the preacher to explain Genesis 6:4, wherein the Bible claims there used to be giants.
This guy's my favorite.
Yeah, right? So here's the passage from the King James Version. Quote, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." End quote.
And if we're just doing free form service here, Pastor, after the Giants, can you do the story about the girl who loved donkey-sized dicks? I love that passage.
Do getting pie wrong. Do getting pie wrong.
Bats and birds.
Bats and birds, yes!
So after some indeterminate amount of time listening to a grown-ass man defend the proposition that giants once fucked human ladies, Hull had a thought that
Caliente.
everyone on this podcast has had on what I'm guessing is a pretty regular basis. Man, if I didn't have any morals, I could make a fortune off these idiots. Right? But in Hull's case, it turns out he
Stupid
didn't
morals.
have any morals, so he made a fortune off those idiots. And to do that, he set about making himself some fake giant remains.
Okay, the answer is yes, Noah. You don't have to be all vague like you're asking to do anal. We'll do a Christian podcast with you and make more
We don't
money.
even have to stop doing this one, Noah. We can eat and have two games. There's no crossover of the audience. We can do both.
Yeah, I have never said I won't sell out. It's just I won't sell out cheap. That's what I keep saying. I won't sell out cheap.
I'll sell out cheap.
Okay, so
Pretty cheap.
very important from a moral perspective. Never be vague about anal. Be super specific. Now,
That was the takeaway. Yep.
of course, one way to go about the giant remains would be to make a bunch of fake bones or like find real bones that you can modify and combine in whatever way you needed. But that struck Hull as a whole big thing, and B, way more trouble than it was going to take to fool 19th century Christians.
Okay, fair enough.
So
Yeah.
instead, he decided to go with a petrified man. Like,
Is that
so you know how there's
That a thing?
petrified trees? It's like that, but
sure?
Yes.
with a human.
Okay.
Now, if you're thinking to yourself, but Noah, that would just be a statue. Yes, it would just be a fucking. He
I was
made
thinking that to
a
myself.
statue, and he said it was a real petrified dude, and then he charged idiots to look at it.
Yes, he did.
Okay, it feels like people were just pretending to know what petrified means because they'd be embarrassed. Like he said petrified, and they're like, oh, yeah, this is petrified, right? Yeah, that explains. Like, it's like quantum or Heisenberg uncertainty principle now. People say, oh, yeah, it's Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Yeah, it's the old HUP. I get it, too.
It wasn't. No, it wasn't always like that. First, it was afraid. Then it was petrified.
Cecil.
Don't you boo me! Don't you boo me, Eli Bosnick! Do
That
not
one, man,
boo
you
me!
can just walk out the door because you're not welcome here anymore.
Both of you.
Tom gets it, Eli. Tom gets it, Eli.
Podcast schism. Podcast schism.
All right, so to Hull's credit, it was a
Eli is pouring shit on his tits in protest.
I hope everyone's a repeat listener. Otherwise, that's
That makes sense if you're a repeat listener, everybody. I'm not a crazy
You
person
gotta-
who just thought of that.
You gotta listen
apropos
to
of
them in
nothing.
order, starting with what?
Cecil, if you love me, you'll remove all shit tits from the catalog. That's just a thing. He just
There's a random shit tits reference that no one gets.
If you're brand new, please email me your questions
You
about
add
this.
3 minutes of silence right after that. To Hull's credit, it was a pretty solid statue, right? In all, he would spend over $3,000 on this thing, and that's like in then money, right? That's $100,000 in today's money. So first, he secured a 5-ton block of gypsum, which he told the 5-ton block of gypsum dealer, I don't know who the hell you'd buy that from. He told him he was going to use it to make a huge statue of Abe Lincoln.
Okay, but why do you have to tell him anything? Like, is there like a use test for the sale of gypsum that he had to pass? Yeah, I want to chuck a fucking gypsum. Fuck you, because that's why I want it. Sell me the gypsum.
I'm sorry, sir. Are you selling so much gypsum that you get to be choosy about your
Right,
customers?
yeah.
You're not going to use this to make a giant petrified man and bury it in the earth. Because that's no.
Listen, there's a gypsum show loophole. You have to just sell it to me right now.
So now the next thing he needs,
I'm not going to mass murder people with gypsum. I don't even know who said that. You said that first. You're being weird.
now the next thing he needs is a corrupt sculptor. And if there's any place that screams corrupt sculptor, it's the city whose most noteworthy statue is a $23 million lima bean built by a guy who tries to hog whole fucking colors. So he has this gypsum shipped to Chicago.
And when they got the gypsum, they at first they thought it was a pizza. They were like, this is-
It sits in the stomach just like that. Yeah. Now,
took as long to get, so sure.
Takes about as
Yeah.
long to form. It's geologic time
Yeah, no.
scale for cooking a fucking Chicago pizza now.
so ultimately, Hull brings in
What epic is this pizza
Yeah.
from? Don't worry about it. You'll get it.
Chicago pizzas have a vintage and shit, you know. So now ultimately he brings in 3 accomplices. A marble dealer who has the space they're going to need to work, and 2 sculptors who are cool, not asking a lot of questions. They all agree to take the job in exchange for a cut of the future profits, and over the next year, with George Hull himself acting as the model, the Cardiff Giant takes shape. The finished product is 10 feet tall, weighs almost 3,000 pounds, and when they're done, they douse the whole thing with sulfuric acid to give it this eroded look, and to make it look more lifelike, Hull drove pins all through it to give it little pores.
Were people going to be looking at this and being like, what's, I don't know, the skincare regimen of the Nephilim? I feel like it was better than this. This is fake.
So pores or no, this motherfucker does not look remotely lifelike.
Nope.
It looks like a fucking statue. That being said, it's not positioned like you would position a statue. It's lying down with one hand over its stomach, with its schlong hanging out. It's got this weird, incongruous half smile, one that has very much of a fuck you gullible pieces of shit look to it that you know George Hull insisted on, right?
It makes no sense. We have a picture of it in front of us right now. It makes no sense, any of it.
Yeah.
No.
Well, so the goal here is obviously to position it in such a way that people would look at it and say, why would anyone carve a statue like that?
Listener, you have to go find the statue because it looks exactly like Henry Kissinger slipped in the shower. That's exactly what it looks like.
It does. That's very accurate. Yeah. Henry Kissinger slipped in the shower, but then he apparently started doing a flamenco dance with a penis waggle move. And then blam, petrifying a laser, because that's how it's a laser, right? You get petrified in a second. And you just get your gypsum. It's like ice knives.
Now, of course, once he's got this petrified giant, the next big step is finding it, right? So he scopes around for a bit, but ultimately he settles on the home of a distant relative named William Stubb Newell. Newell owned a farm in Cardiff, New York, and he had no qualms whatsoever with lying for money. So they brought him in on the deal and set about surreptitiously burying the giant on his property.
Feels like that would have been awkward if they got caught by anybody else, right? They're just like, oh, us? We're growing Ron Perlmans this year. But don't tell anyone.
100%. That's amazing.
Okay, we'll just we'll bury him in this anthill. Nope, that one's already full of diamonds. Fuck, wrong scam. Fuck, all right, keep looking.
It's a weird time to be alive. Now, surreptitiously burying a 10-foot, 3,000-pound slab of stone is not a simple proposition. First, you have to ship it from Chicago to New York in such a way that everybody won't say, well, that's a weird-looking fucking statue along the way. Right? So Hull has the whole thing sealed in a gigantic iron box, and apparently people were entirely cool with, please move a big-ass 1.5-ton iron box for me, but don't look inside back then, because the giant made its way without incident. Now, so in 1868, Hull and his accomplices buried the statue alongside Newell's barn, wedged in under some roots, right? So it looked like it's been there longer than the tree.
Okay, Bill, let's bury the giant here, and then we can dig a hole for that chrome bean on the other side of the garage. It'll work out perfect.
So now after that, Hull went back to his tobacco shop in New York and did, cigar stuff or whatever for a while. Nobody saw the giant in transit, but, if they dug the thing up the next day, it's pretty likely somebody would say, hey, didn't you just have that thing-sized box delivered here yesterday?
Sure.
And of course, the longer it stayed in the ground, the more weathered it was going to look. So it was almost a year before Hull pulled the trigger on the scam. But in October of 1869, he sent Newell a letter telling him to dig it up.
Feels like cigar stuff should be trademarked by Bill Clinton. I don't know.
Amen, brother. Amen. We'll find out. We'll check with Andrew and make sure it's all right for us to use. Now, of course, to keep it as plausible as possible, they wanted it to actually be discovered. So Newell hired a couple of unsuspecting workers to dig a well over by his barn. The giant wasn't buried very deep, so almost immediately the workers come across this big stone foot. And while there's obviously no direct record of what was said at the time, the exclamation attributed to one of the workers is, quote, I declare some old Indian has been buried here. And that is among the least stupid reactions to this statue that we're going to come across in this essay.
Cool. Well, looks like we need to call in a team of people with wooden stakes, twine, and tiny brushes to dust off this statue's 21-inch penis. So we'll take a break for a little apropos of nothing.
gentlemen, how goes the work on our giant?
Quite good, sir. I'd say he's about done.
And you done with that ironic smile I asked for and a face like mine?
Indeed, sir. Have a look for yourself.
Well done, well done. It's just,
Yes, sir?
well, proportionally, the bits, they look a little small, don't they?
The bits? Sir?
The tallywhacker, the Hogan. It just seems it could be a bit more girthy.
I mean, it looks fine to me, sir.
Yeah, it seems
Well,
fine to me,
it's
too.
not
I'm
your
looking
face
right
on
at
it,
the,
though, is it?
I'm looking
It's
at
not.
yours, and it looks right. Okay, I just want to be clear, though. You're worried people are going to judge the size of your bits based on our fake
You know what? I
giant-
said make it bigger. There's no need for questions.
Fine.
Okay.
And I girthier, wider.
Got it.
Okay.
Before the break, the world was torn between believing in a comforting fantasy or a harsh reality. And Noah was telling us about a statue that looks like it's doing the pee-pee dance. What happened next, Noah?
That's what it is.
Yep.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you, Cecil. That was bothering me. I thought flamenco,
No,
but
it's
yeah,
definitely
more of a
pee-pee
dancing. It could be both, but definitely the pee-pee.
There's a lot of crossover.
It's a very
There's a lot of
flamboyant pee-pee
shared
dance you
space on
do.
that Venn diagram, yeah.
Because he's doing the arm twisty thing, too. But yeah.
Right. So once the statue was unearthed, the news started spreading fast. First, of course, all the people in the immediate area got caught up. According to contemporary newspaper articles, basically the whole town shut down while everybody hurried over to old Stubbs' farm to see the marvel. People just left their jobs and lined up and shit. And
What was happening in 18, whatever the fuck, people were just like, I want to go see the rock thing. And they'd line up.
nothing was fucking happening.
No TV,
Oh,
no
man.
movies, no
Nope.
nothing.
Absolutely. So, fuck yeah, they did. But since Cardiff was already well known for its fossils, a lot of people started spreading the story that it was a petrified man without any prompting from Newell or Hall at all.
George is getting ready to spread around some bullshit. Local pastors like, no, sir, we'll take it from here. Leave this to the
actually.
pros, brother.
Now, I should emphasize here that from the very beginning, the scientific community rejected this thing. Virtually every expert that ever saw it was like, yeah, that's fucking fake. Also, humans don't petrify. That's not even a thing. One of the first experts was a Syracuse-based science lecturer who examined it for a few minutes and said, yeah, guys, that's a fucking statue. No, he didn't suspect the farmer was working in conjunction with an interstate conspiracy to trick people into thinking it was a petrified biblical giant. He theorized that it was carved by French Jesuits centuries earlier, but he didn't entertain the idea for a second that it could be the remains of an actual being.
Just a giant lying there, partially clothed. Carve me like one of your French girls.
And from all accounts, by the way, Newell nailed his part of this. I mean, you'd imagine a scenario where they dig the thing up and the very next day he rolls out a tent, throws it over there, and puts a "See the Cardiff Giant for 50 cents" sign hanging off the side of it, spoils the whole thing. But Newell played the part of the humble farmer and accepted the expert's assertion. Hell, he even vowed at one point very publicly to rebury the thing and forget about the whole ordeal. And then he had to let his neighbors publicly convince him otherwise. And then he put a big tent around it with a "See the Cardiff Giant for 50 cents" hanging off the side of it.
Oh, well, gosh, fellas, if you insist I take your money, I guess I will let you whitewash history and this fence with me. That's fine. How come nobody brought that up? That it was like, yeah, okay, Nephilim wouldn't be like a white guy
Yeah,
from
right.
New York.
Yeah. Of course he would be. Now, the newspapers were more than happy to rustle up a bit of business for Newell, too. The front page headlines of the Syracuse Daily Standard declared it a new wonder, and papers all over the state were calling it the discovery of the century. Within a week, more than 2,500 people had already paid to see it. Just as quickly, people started to get suspicious of the whole thing. Right, sure, it had been a year, but people still remembered Stubb Newell having an unexplained 10-foot iron box delivered to his farm not that long ago. Only a couple of experts had examined it, and while none of them were yet calling it a hoax, none of them were buying into the whole petrified man bit either, and big fucking statue of unknown origin isn't going to bring in the throngs quite like proof the Bible was right about giants. So the conspirators decided to cash in sooner than later and sold a 3/4 stake to a syndicate of New York businessmen for $30,000. That we're talking about like $1 million in today's money and a 10-fold return on investment. Plus, of course, they retain a quarter of its future profits.
Yeah, I mean, if our podcast has a moral, it's don't touch the nuclear thing. Governments are bad at their jobs, and get out of your scams sooner rather than later.
Yeah, books are fucking stupid. Books are dumb.
That one too.
Okay, I just want to circle back to this group of New York businessmen, that syndicate. That's clearly Mormons being like, hey, George, burying fake stuff in upstate New York is our thing. We are buying that, please. And never mention this again. Back the fuck off.
So over the next few weeks, as predicted, more and more experts started showing up to examine Newell's discovery, but not all of them were as incredulous as that Syracuse lecturer. For example, New York State geologist James Hall declared it legitimate and called it, quote, the most remarkable object yet brought to light in our country. On the other side of the spectrum, you had Yale paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh, who needed to give it all but a glance before he declared it to be, quote, a very recent origin and a most decided humbug.
Yeah, well, that's because Marsh is skeptic of the year. That makes sense.
I actually want all skeptical criticisms written exclusively in old timey. You know, like, by gum, I declare this man's all hat and no cattle. Why, he's just another thunder-headed gentleman of 4 outs, and this Grumbletonian nincompoops try to pass off this ridiculous Golympus like we're a patch of fribbles.
Yeah, man, that's why we have Marsh.
Yeah, right. No,
Exactly.
exactly.
Marsh.
Within a few weeks, there was plenty of information for a skeptic to conclude that this was bullshit. Reporters quickly learned that it was George Hall who actually delivered the mysterious giant iron box to the farm the year before, and once they had his name, it wasn't hard to figure out that Newell had transferred a sizable chunk of cash to Hall after he sold that 3/4 interest. There was also technical issues like a mining engineer pointed out at the time, gypsum deteriorates pretty quickly when it's buried. So the thing would have disappeared if it was old at all. Also, the area where it was buried would have made no sense as a place to dig a fucking well. There were roots there.
Sometimes I want a quick drink from the corner of my barn, Greg. Don't tell me how to have a nice, refreshing drink, Greg.
Okay, it is 2022, and there are still professional dowsers, so, like, maybe let's not get too high and mighty about where the wells should and shouldn't be.
No, that's
Yes,
fair.
that's true.
Fair. That's real.
Alas, as Hull had predicted all those years ago, no amount of obvious would be enough to dissuade the endless parade of suckers that wanted to see proof of their holy book. And one thing you could count on in 1869 America, wherever there was a parade of suckers, there would also be P.T. Barnum with an open checkbook. Almost immediately, the famed con artist, why use a nice word? It's
Right.
a fucking famed con artist tried to buy the thing. There's no record of how much he offered, but clearly it wasn't enough because the statue's consortium of owners turned him down. Of course, the thing was an obvious fucking fake, and P.T. Barnum knows how statues are made, so when he couldn't get the original, he just commissioned some sculptors to carve him one. So they did. And they put it on display at a museum in Manhattan and took out an ad that reads, this is so amazing, quote, what is it? Is it a statue? Is it a petrification? Is it a stupendous fraud? Is it the remains of a former race? Apparently, the rule of threes was discovered at some later date. But nobody knew this wasn't the petrified giant that they'd been reading about in the papers, so they flocked to the museum, and Barnum made a fucking fortune.
It's nice to know that just asking questions has such a famous backstory, though.
Right?
They didn't have to bury it in New York City. They just left it on the sidewalk, and in 3 days, it had 30 layers of stratified garbage on it, so it was fine.
Sure, but also a dog.
Yes. Yes.
Pluses and minuses.
Now, this was an issue for the owners, of course, who had the original, because they were already slated to bring their petrified giant to Manhattan to display it in a museum, and they couldn't compete with Barnum's advertising budget, so they tried to sue him. But ultimately the judge ruled that you can't fake something that's already fake to begin with. Right? But plus, his "is it a fraud, is it real, is it a duck" wording, if nothing else, pretty easy to defend legally, right?
Noted.
Is it real? Is it a duck? Is it free ivermectin under this floating anvil that I made? Check out the Red X. Enjoy.
And of course, making a big public scene about how fake Barnum's Giant was would only serve to underscore how easily it would be to fake this whole damn thing. So they had no choice but to just set up shop nearby and try to have the better fake petrified giant. P.T. Barnum wasn't the only person who thought of copying Hull's fake. When they heard how big it was getting in New York, the corrupt marble dealer and the corrupt sculptors from Chicago decided they could knock out a few more of those and sell them all over the country. And once there were a dozen different statues of varying quality, all claiming to be petrified biblical giants, it started to seem hokey even to the people who wouldn't automatically recoil at the stupidity of that sentence.
And that is a bold statement given the target demographic. That is
right?
I get it. Road Rules wore out its welcome too.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually. Now, within a few years, the fascination died, the crowds dried up, and the original got pawned off to ever more obscure museums and even had a brief stint as a coffee table in a rich guy's rumpus room.
That's amazing.
In 1947, it found its way to the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York, where it is still displayed today.
Noah, what else is in the Farmers Museum?
It's literally straw and nothing else. I hate straw. I have to go there. I'm a kid and I like playing baseball, and I'm like, I just want to go to the fucking Hall of Fame. It's right down the road. And we had to listen. We had to go to straw stuff. We had to look at straw. This is a stick with straw on it. And this is straw in a cube formation. This is straw in also a cube formation. Fuck you. I want to go see baseball. So stupid.
It's pretty fucking stupid. Yeah. So George Hull cashed out, moved on. Eventually, one of the original sculptors confessed his part in the hoax to a newspaper, and at that point, Hull just started openly bragging about it. Right? Like the whole point was obviously to rub credulous people's noses in their credulity, and he couldn't do that without admitting the damn thing was fake. But eventually, all the money dried up, so he decided to try it again with much less impressive results.
So good.
His next fake was a 7-foot-tall giant with a tail that he buried and unearthed in Colorado.
I fucking love this guy, though. I
fame.
love him so much.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, the public was a bit wiser to the scam by then, and, he'd publicly bragged about faking the last one, so nobody was buying that one. He ended up losing a pretty substantial amount of money. But regardless, he would go to his grave proud of all the idiots he tricked with the original.
I feel like the tail was, he was like, make the dick bigger. Somebody's like, you know what? I'm going to give you a back dick. There you go.
I feel like if that guy was here today, he'd start a new podcast along with his other podcast. That's what he starts. Multiple podcasts. If you had to summarize what you learned in one sentence, what would it be, Noah?
It turns out I do have a hero.
Are you ready for the quiz?
Always, sir.
Noah, why aren't we bad guys?
Right.
A, you hate money.
He said he's into it. You heard that earlier. He said he was into it. That was what was happening there, right?
B, threesomes with supermodels seem intimidatingly difficult when you think about it.
That is actually true. I mean, let's be real honest.
No.
C, you love lying awake at night thinking, gee, I hope a bunch of people don't get mad about a joke they don't like and starve my baby. Or D, something morals or whatever.
Jesus Christ.
I have no idea. I know I have to win for the format or whatever, but I don't
All right, Noah, I think I can help you actually with my question. Yeah, why aren't we bad guys? A, no, really. Why aren't we? Or B, see me after the show. Got anyone just
it's
round
be
over?
B.
See me after the show.
The answer is going to be B on that one.
I'll make
I
drinks.
got an idea for a YouTube show. It's pretty great, guys. I'll tell you afterwards.
Are the red pills a metaphor? Do I have to buy them now, like in bulk? How does that work?
All right, no, I got one more for you.
Both.
Who's doing the soundtrack for the movie about burying fake bullshit from the Bible underground? A, Woo Fighters. B, Cardiff B. Cardiff B. C, they might be giants.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So
See,
good.
they might be giants.
That's perfect.
No matter what, Heath, you were going to win with that. So it doesn't matter what the answer is, you win.
It never did.
All right. I would like Cecil for next week. Thank you for giving me the win. You're up next.
All right. Okay. Well, for Eli, Noah, Tom, and Heath, I'm Cecil. Thank you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week. And by then, I will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can check out The Scathing Atheist, The Skeptocrat, D&D Minus, God-Awful Movies, and Cognitive Dissonance. And if you'd like to help keep this show going, you can make a per-episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod or leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. If you'd like to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com.
Okay, it's done. Are we good now?
2 more inches.
Come on.
This is
really?
getting ridiculous.
Just do it, okay?
It's not that kind of giant.